The frail, sinewy hands of an alien wrapped tightly around an AK-47, a weapon synonymous with the wars of mankind. The stark contrast between those slender, almost delicate fingers and the cold, deadly instrument of destruction created a dissonance that was impossible to ignore. The steel of the gun burned against his skin, an almost surreal sensation, as if the weapon itself was more than just a tool of war, it was the embodiment of a grim reality he was about to confront. This belongs to them, he thought, recognizing immediately that the weapon was a creation of humanity. From the very moment he touched it, something felt off, an unshakable premonition about the true nature of this artifact. It should have been his first warning, he was meddling in a world shrouded in mystery and peril. The smugglers he had encountered were ordinary alien creatures, small and unassuming, almost human in their unremarkable appearances, yet exuding a cunning edge. The sheer incongruity between these simple smugglers and their cargo, an AK-47, the epitome of destruction, only heightened the tension. They seemed insignificant and mundane, but the presence of the gun turned everything into an unsettling tableau. Meanwhile, the one holding the gun, our protagonist, an alien operative named Ekes, stood tall, his sharp features exuding an aura of command. He was a figure of dominance, radiating calm authority, but within him, a primal unease was stirring. He began to see the weapon not just as a tool but as a clue, a fragment of humanity's true nature. Ekes mused silently, if they can craft things like this, just to play their games, then how simple could they be? Or, perhaps, how dangerous are they? This question encapsulated his simultaneous suspicion and disdain for humans, a species he regarded as small, primitive, and insignificant. Yet, beneath it all, there flickered a sliver of curiosity, mingled with a gnawing apprehension. The AK-47, with its crude design, wasn't the type of high-tech weaponry Ekes was accustomed to. It wasn't an energy rifle, it didn't emit dazzling light or booming sounds. And yet, its simplicity was what made him chuckle, a low, dark laugh tinged with scorn and wild excitement. To him, it was like a child's toy, a primitive weapon crafted by a primitive race, yet undeniably lethal. The cold steel of the AK-47 in Ekes' hands became a symbol of the clash between two worlds, the advanced technology of alien civilizations and the remarkable ingenuity and adaptability of humanity. In that moment, Ekes embarked on a journey of discovery, not just of mankind but of the limits of his own arrogance and the fragile perception of superiority he had clung to. When Ekes officially encountered humanity, not through rumors or research, but by witnessing firsthand their raw survival instincts, he stood atop the ruins of a deserted building, gazing down at a group of humans gathered around a crackling fire. The flames flickered across their faces, casting an almost primal glow. From this vantage point, Ekes began to sense something strange, something far beyond the tales he had heard about mankind. This group, consisting of both men and women, hardly resembled warriors. They wore no advanced armor, nor did they wield powerful laser weapons like the ones Ekes was accustomed to in intergalactic wars. Instead, they wore tattered clothes, most patched together with mismatched fabric. Yet, in their eyes, Ekes saw an unusual focus and determination. A determination that even the most well-trained soldiers in his own alien army would struggle to match. Is this humanity? Ekes wondered, both astonished and cynical. He had always thought of humans as primitive creatures with limited intellect, relying more on instinct than reason. But the scene before him told a different story. The light from the fire illuminated their faces, and in their eyes, Ekes saw things he had never sensed in any other species: courage, unity, and a controlled fear. A man in the group stood up, his face grim and watchful. He spoke to the others, his voice deep yet powerful, causing an immediate silence among them. Ekes didn't understand their language, but he could feel the weight of every word. It wasn't the empty rhetoric of military leaders from his alien alliance, this was the voice of someone willing to sacrifice everything for those around him. When the man raised an old rifle, Ekes couldn't help but chuckle quietly. The weapon looked like a relic, rusted, with a wooden stock worn from use. But as the man began to inspect his weapon, he did so with a precision and professionalism that caught Ekes' attention. "It seems they know their tools better than I thought," Ekes muttered, his sharp eyes tracking every movement of the man. What Ekes didn't realize was that, in that very moment, he was changing. The initial smugness was beginning to fade, replaced by curiosity and a tinge of respect. He began to understand that humanity didn't survive just by their tools, but by their resilience and practical intelligence. These creatures didn't rely on advanced technology to endure, they survived because of their ability to adapt and unite in the face of adversity. From his high vantage point, Ekes' gaze shifted from curiosity to admiration. The humans below, though small and seemingly weak, radiated a latent strength he had never seen in any other species. This was no longer a story of a primitive race under oppression, but one of a species willing to fight until their last breath, not for power or territory, but for survival. In that moment, Ekes was not just observing humanity, he was beginning to learn from them. He witnessed a scene both tragic and extraordinary. One member of the human group, a young woman with eyes burning bright like fire, rose to face a massive beast, a ferocious creature that had already spread terror across the region. The beast, over 4 meters tall with bulging muscles and a mouthful of sharp teeth, was the very embodiment of destruction. It roared, the sound reverberating through the crumbling ruins, shaking the ground beneath. From his safe vantage point high above, Ekes initially believed this would be the end for the humans. How could such a small, fragile creature, armed with only crude weapons, possibly stand against a killing machine like that? But then, something unexpected happened. The woman did not flee. She did not panic. Instead, she stepped forward. In her hand, she gripped a makeshift spear, its head fashioned from scrap metal. Her stance was firm, her gaze unwavering, undaunted by the size or brutality of the creature. She let out a battle cry, not just to push away fear, but to warn her comrades. Ekes froze, his eyes locked on every movement she made. This is madness, he thought, but deep within, he couldn't help but feel a surge of respect. This wasn't mere bravery, this was a form of courage that transcended reason, something Ekes had never seen in any other species. As the beast charged, the woman didn't retreat but instead launched herself toward it, using speed and agility to dodge its deadly swipes. Her spear struck at the creature's weak spots, the eyes, the gaps in its natural armor. Each thrust was calculated, efficient, never wasting a single ounce of strength. Even as she was wounded in the shoulder and arm, she did not falter, she did not step back. The others in the group did not remain idle. They did not abandon her, they rallied, using whatever they had, stones, old rifles, even rusted steel rods. They were not trained warriors, but each fought with everything they had, as if they were one singular force. Ekes realized something he didn't want to admit: this unity was not something that could be forged through military discipline or commands from higher ups. This was something different, something born of trust and sacrifice. They did not fight for fame or personal gain, but for each other, for the survival of the group. When the battle ended, the beast collapsed with a final roar, its massive body crashing to the ground in a cloud of dust. The woman fell to her knees, breathing heavily, blood trickling from the wound on her shoulder. But she did not cry out, she did not scream in pain. Instead, she looked back at her group with a weak smile. She had survived, and so had they. From a distance, Ekes could not help but feel a wave of emotion rising within him. They are not the weak creatures I once thought them to be, he quietly reflected. Instead, they were warriors, but unlike any he had ever encountered. They fought not for glory or power, but for simpler, yet more powerful reasons, for love, for trust, and for hope. In that moment, Ekes saw not just a battle, but the true essence of humanity, resilience, courage, and the ability to overcome any adversity by uniting and sacrificing for one another. This was not the survival of the strongest, but the triumph of hearts that would never surrender. Ekes was not only captivated by humanity's courage but began to recognize a deeper truth: humans did not merely survive based on physical strength or technology, but through extraordinary spiritual qualities he had never seen in any other species. The scene before him was one of chaos, a makeshift camp amidst the ruins of a city that once stood as a symbol of civilization, now reduced to a faint shadow of life. In this environment, the survivors worked feverishly to repair basic necessities, share the little food they had, and tend to the wounded. But instead of groans or complaints, the air was filled with soft laughter, witty jokes, and eyes shining with hope. A strange paradox Ekes could not comprehend. He watched as an elderly man told jokes to the children. Though his body was frail, his hair silver, and his hands trembled, his voice was filled with warmth. The children, despite their tattered clothes and dirt-streaked faces, smiled brightly, as though the world outside held no fear for them. Ekes couldn't understand it. How could, in the midst of such dire circumstances, humans still find a reason to laugh? A little while later, a young woman approached and handed the elderly man a bowl of water. It was a simple act, one that would mean nothing to any other species, but in this situation, where resources were scarce, it was a sacrifice of great significance. Ekes felt conflicted, for he had been taught that in harsh environments, beings would turn on one another, thinking only of themselves. Yet what he witnessed here was the complete opposite. Ekes turned to look at a young man who was trying to repair an old, broken machine. He had no advanced tools, only what he had scavenged from the rubble. But his calloused hands never stopped moving, and his eyes shone with determination. This surprised Ekes, for to him, attempting to fix something nearly useless seemed pointless. But what Ekes didn't understand was that for humans, every effort, no matter how small, held meaning. They did not work merely to survive, they worked because they believed a better future was within reach. Another moment that left Ekes stunned was when a young man, severely injured in the battle with the beast, still smiled and reassured those around him that he was fine. He even joked, "Looks like I'm still better looking than that beast." Laughter rang through the small tent, easing the worry of everyone there. It was resilience that Ekes couldn't explain with ordinary logic. These small, yet profound moments made Ekes rethink everything. Humans are not only strong when they fight, but they also possess an invisible strength, a spiritual energy that transcends all. It wasn't technology, it wasn't muscle, but faith, unity, and the ability to find meaning even in the most desperate of circumstances. Ekes began to wonder if his own species, with all its strength and intelligence, truly understood the value of these seemingly simple things. He could not deny that humans, though small and fragile, had something the other species lacked: the ability to turn suffering into strength, loss into hope, and adversity into the driving force to rise above. This scene not only moved Ekes, but it also sparked in him a greater question: is it these intangible elements that create humanity's invincibility? And this was the first step, where his curiosity transformed into respect, a respect that even he had not yet fully realized. When he directly confronted what he had previously dismissed as meaningless actions, Ekes was stunned. In this moment, a group of humans had risen to protect a badly injured comrade, fully aware that this would cost them their lives. This was not just an instinctive act of collective survival, but a testament to the higher spiritual values that humanity held dear. The scene was one of intense tension. An open field, where the remaining survivors were being hunted by a massive beast creature so terrifying that even Ekes felt a chill. Each step of the beast shook the earth, its roar and the dust it kicked up filling the air. The survivors knew they had neither the weapons nor the strength to face the creature head-on, yet they chose an action that seemed paradoxical: they did not flee. In Ekes' eyes, this was incomprehensible. To him, survival instincts were the ultimate law of every creature. He had expected that when faced with certain death, humans would abandon their weakest member to save themselves. But what he witnessed was the exact opposite. A young woman, her body exhausted, still struggled to lift an injured comrade onto her shoulder. Others formed a protective circle around them, ready to face the beast. No one retreated. No one showed fear. Ekes watched their eyes, not the eyes of the desperate, but eyes filled with determination. One of them threw a stone at the beast, not to attack, but to draw its attention. This act was a challenge, a way to protect the others, if only for a few precious seconds. It was then that Ekes began to feel something beyond his understanding. Why would they risk their lives for an injured person, someone who was clearly incapable of fighting? To him, it seemed an unacceptable waste, for in his civilization, the weak would be left behind, and collective strength could only be preserved by eliminating the burdens. But humans, it seemed, operated by a different rule. Camaraderie, their actions were not born out of mere personal compassion, but from a collective value, brotherhood. They would not abandon anyone, even in the most perilous of circumstances. This displayed an invisible yet powerful strength, unity. Selflessness, the man who stepped forward to lure the beast knew he might die, but he accepted it. His selflessness stood as proof of the capacity to sacrifice oneself for a greater good, a quality Ekes had never seen in any other species. Hope in adversity, though they knew their chances of survival were slim, they refused to give up. This act showed the faith of humanity, a form of spiritual strength that even cold, rational logic could not explain. Ekes felt a strange emotion welling up within him, respect. Here was a being, superior in intellect and strength, who found himself humbled before the will of humanity. He realized that humanity's existence was not only built on muscle or intellect but on extraordinary spiritual values that drove them to face death in defense of what they held dear. As the group of survivors finally managed to escape the beast's pursuit, Ekes couldn't take his eyes off them. He wondered, what makes them so extraordinary? What makes them willing to sacrifice not for personal gain, but for something greater? And from that moment on, he knew that humanity was not just a species to conquer, they were a mystery to be explored and, perhaps, learned from.